Hey, so check this out. For basically forever, battles were just forgotten, Like back in prehistoric times, nobody even remembered who won or who the big heroes were. Eventually, people started writing stuff down, but it wasn't much detail. But there's this one spot on the walls of a temple way down the Nile in Egypt where the Egyptians carved out this super detailed account of battle. And I mean detailed. This right here, this is that story. So picture this. It's around 1458 BC, and word spreading everywhere that the Egyptian pharaoh is rolling up from the desert with this massive army. They're moving north, passing through Gaza, and then they're looking at this stretch of rough terrain. And beyond that, there's Megiddo, this huge city built on a hilltop, where thousands of enemy soldiers are waiting. Now the pharaoh, this young guy named Thutmose III, he's thinking hard about how to approach this battlefield. His generals come to him, right? And they're telling him, "Look, dude, there's two safe roads that go north and east. You gotta take one of those. That other road, the one straight through, no way, man. It's too narrow and nasty. Let's stick to the safe route." But here's the thing. Thutmose knows about a third way. There's this narrow mountain pass called Aruna. It's all jagged and gnarly. And yeah, there could be an ambush waiting at the exit. But the wild part? It runs practically right up to the base of that enemy city. And even though Thutmose has only been the total ruler of Egypt for like a few months, he's got the authority of Amun-Ra, the god, right? The big god. So when he decides to take that pass, the whole army, they're coming with him. Picture this scene. The troops are packed tight together. Chariots are being taken apart, and porters and pack animals are dragging all the pieces. There's this scribe walking along with a scroll, and he's going to write down everything that happens. He's literally documenting history as it goes down. The battle's just days away now. The conflict builds. Here's why this matters. Armies back then were super vulnerable to getting ambushed, especially when they weren't paying attention or scouting ahead properly. But while we're talking military strategy, let me paint the bigger picture of what's actually happening here. The rulers of other countries have basically spotted that the Egyptian throne looks kind of weak right now. See, Thutmose used to be co-ruler under this female pharaoh named Hatshepsut. She was a stepmom and his aunt. Weird, I know. She was married to his late father, so the whole family tree situation was pretty complicated. But her reign? That was solid. Egypt was doing great. She actually built this incredible temple called the Temple of Hatshepsut with these awesome pillar terraces carved right into the mountainside, statues, sphinxes, gardens hanging over pools. Beautiful stuff. But now Hatshepsut's dead, and the crown is totally Thutmose's. So this prince from a city called Kadesh, he sees a shot, right? He teams up with the Mitanni Empire and gathers forces from all these Canaanite and Syrian tribes. They set up shop in Megiddo, this fortified town, and boom! Suddenly Egypt can't get the stuff it needs. We're talking specific types of wood for making chariots, tin for bronze weapons. And honestly, the whole coalition might have been planning to straight up invade Egypt and bring war to the Nile itself. But Thutmose doesn't wait for that. He's like, nah, I'm striking first. All right, so after almost 3 weeks of marching, Thutmose and his army, we're talking over 10,000 warriors, they reach this place called Yeum. 3 roads to Megiddo are right in front of them. Scouts go out, and then Thutmose calls all his generals together. He's like, that enemy prince from Kadesh? He's in Megiddo right now. He's pulled together every foreign prince who used to be loyal to us. The generals are still pushing the safer routes, warning him that if he takes that narrow Aruna road, the enemy is going to destroy them when they come out the other side. But then the scouts come back with new intel, and it changes everything. Thutmose stands up and tells his whole army. He's basically like, you guys are going to stick with me on this narrow road. And then, this is hardcore, he walks in front of the army himself and leads them into that pass. Now here's a wild detail. The hills actually give them cover for most of the approach. Plus, the enemy forces are kind of split up. The southern wing is guarding one road, the northern wing's in a valley, and when the Egyptians come through, there's no opposition. Thutmose might have even cut through a secret exit that wasn't visible. Either way, the whole Egyptian army pours out onto the plain, without getting hit. The enemy tries to pull back as it gets dark, and the Egyptians set up camp. The soldiers get their rations, sentries are posted, and everyone's getting ready for the next morning's showdown. The aftermath and legacy. When dawn breaks, the enemy army lines up for battle. Behind them is Megiddo, this insanely strong city that's supposedly worth 1,000 cities by itself. Then the Egyptians come marching, and it all kicks off. The battle itself becomes total chaos. Archers let loose arrows first. Then infantry crashes into the enemy lines. You got guys with sickle swords and axes smashing into shields, chariots roaring across the field. It turns into a complete massacre. The enemy breaks, and people are getting cut down left and right. But here's where it gets kind of frustrating. The Egyptian soldiers see all the dead enemy stuff just lying there, and they get greedy. They're like, yo, free loot. Instead of finishing the job, they're picking through the battlefield, grabbing plunder. The enemy manages to get into Megiddo, and the gates shut. So Thutmose is like, all right, new plan, we're starving them out. He orders his army to build a ditch and a timber wall all around the city. It takes months, and the siege just drags on. But eventually, Megiddo surrenders, along with 3 other towns in the area. The annals, these ancient records, describe the princes coming out on their bellies to kiss the ground, to beg for mercy. Thutmose takes their wealth, their grain, their cattle, all their power. Here's the kicker. When he lets the people go back to their towns, they're walking on donkeys because he literally took all the horses. Empire building. The army heads home loaded with treasure, nearly 2,000 slaves, tons of livestock, and a harvest of wheat. When they get back to the capital city of Thebes, it's absolute celebration. There's feasts, musicians, dancers, nobles everywhere. This battle right here, it changed everything. Thutmose had just proven Egyptian dominance in the Levant, but he doesn't stop. Year after year, this guy's relentless. He builds a whole fleet to move military forces up the coast fast. He puts fortresses all over the region. Megiddo was just the first of 17 military campaigns, over like 2 decades. He's getting tribute, commerce flowing in, gifts from Babylonia, the Hittite Empire, Assyria. He even takes control of most of Nubia to the south. This is the moment when Thutmose III stops just being Pharaoh and becomes an empire builder. He's remembered as one of the greatest rulers in Egyptian history. When he gets older, he builds these massive monuments and works at Karnak Temple, sacred lakes, these towering gates with statues and obelisks, and inscriptions telling the whole story of his military career and the Battle of Megiddo. He ruled for 54 years total, and when his time came around 1425 BC, they carved it on his officer's tomb that the king completed his lifetime of many years, splendid in valor, in might, and in triumph. He mounted to heaven and joined the sun. And you know what? Over 3,000 years later, his image still stands in that temple, right there through the 7th pylon at Karnak, the greatest warrior in Egyptian history, frozen in stone, Thutmose III. And that's how one narrow mountain pass in the guts of a young pharaoh changed the entire course of ancient history. From that moment on, Egypt wasn't just a kingdom, it was an empire. Pretty wild, right?